is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He's currently looking for parts to finish his Fortress of Fang, Stu Horvath.
You know, I guess technically you're right, but I am kind of considering the Fortress of Fang complete. I'm like missing some gate and like a weapons rack. I don't need fencing, you know?
Well, dear listener, if you do have those parts lying around and you don't mind parting with them, you know we're pretty easy to get in touch with on Discord. Because why not complete the Fortress of Fang? I mean, you got the Tiamat, you got all the figures. Well, you're also looking for the Hawk, right?
Yeah, recently I bit the bullet and I got the last 3 stupid LJN toys that I wasn't really willing to buy before now. And I did so for reasons that I'm not going to reveal yet. So yeah, the only LJN toys that I'm missing now are like some picket fencing for the Fortress of Fangs and the stupid clip-on Hawk for Hawkler the Ranger, who looks disturbingly like Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai.
It looks uncanny.
It really is.
And part of me wonders if they did that on purpose. The other half of me thinks that they just, I mean, you've seen those figures. They weren't the best molds.
I haven't actually looked at Johnny Lawrence from Karate Kid, you know, from the 80s. I think that this is just a really strange coincidence because he looks mostly to me like Johnny Lawrence now, like Billy Zabka, like in 2022.
Yeah, it really does look like an older 2022 Billy Zabka. Anyway, we're talking about toys today, obviously. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we are in one way trying to help you complete your LJN D&D collection, but at the same time, toys is the topic. So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about one specific stupid thing that I found. The stuff that gets me most excited about toys is their stupidity. Like the stupider it is, the more I'm like, this is amazing. I can't believe I didn't know about this. But before we do get into that, I do need to just like, because we did lead with the LJN stuff. Like, can we talk for a second about the Lost Wave that's coming out from NECA?
Oh my God, yes.
What? Like I have so like, there's so much. I don't know. Like I just generally feel like D&D is like whatever now. It's like a separate hobby almost. And that's fine. Like whatever. I like it's just not for me. I'm into other stuff. But like the fact that the popularity of D&D has afforded NECA to get the LJN license and made it profitable for them to basically put out what they're doing is there were several figures that were prototyped and almost released back in 84 and 85. And then were scrapped at the last minute because the whole line was scrapped. We've seen them in catalogs. They were in some of the box art. You have Valkyr the Barbarian, Pulveri, who's one of the larger figures. He's big Cyclops with a shooting shield. There was an alternate Kelek. And rumor had it there was a Skyla. I've never seen pictures of the Skyla figure, but apparently NECA got those prototypes and is producing a limited run of them for their convention exclusives this year. I have sort of a bootleg that was made off of a prototype, an actual prototype of Valkyr. And like I've compared my physical Valkyr with the pictures that NECA has released, and these look legit. They look like 84 toys. It's amazing. Like, how did this happen?
So I mean, real talk, they look like 84 toys, but they look like better because it's NECA who like crushes it at their toys, and they made everything look a little better defined than the LJN ones. And like what I love about it is if you look at the bottom of the card art looks great, and they have NECA under the rainbow, which was the LJN logo, which I think is amazing. And you know, they made the characters in different sizes, which is like awesome. And even better than that, you get 3 bad guy characters and you only get 1 good guy character, which, you know, I always think is in imbalance in any kind of toy line. It's like the bad guys, you need them. They're important. That's why they made so many Cobra figures.
Right. The imbalance in the LJN D&D line is large if you don't figure in the other weird, like the PVC monsters and stuff, which I think that they probably did. They're just like, there's so many monsters. We need more hero figures. But like, no, you don't. You need more villains. You need a giant Cyclops with a shooting shield.
I think that's much more important personally in my heart. And you know what's cool about the old LJN figures? What's cool about these NECA figures too? They did make the figures that are supposed to be larger actually larger.
I mean, I think that these are actually working off of like the original prototypes. I truly believe that. I think that the paint jobs are better, and I think that there's like just a advances in toy making technology are going to make these superior figures. But I think that at the core, I think that you're looking at like a necromancy of the past here. And like, I just can't believe that like people were like, okay, let's do this. Now, if they want to be really serious, there's some other toys that they can, and there was a Bahir that was almost made.
Yeah.
Apparently they say that there were wind up toys in the LJN line. I've never actually seen one in the flesh, and I've never really seen one on the secondary market that wasn't in a package and for $2,000. So I don't really believe that those exist. So you can maybe put those out next year. Right.
And there was another playset that never got produced.
That's right,
I mean, there are pictures of it. And it looked gnarly. It looked so good.
Yeah, it was like Snake Cave or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at other companies who are like, you know, oh, here is like this $600 Snake Mountain, like an updated new Snake Mountain. Like, I think that there is definitely a market for people who are like, we love all these old D&D figures. If you could produce that old like second dungeon that never got produced, or like, you know, a Fortress of Fang, I think people would lose their shit, and people would be like, shut up and take my money.
Yeah,
you know, I think it's cool. I think it's great. I think they do a great job with it. And also on a personal level, I think to me, Kelek is what an evil wizard at that should look like. And I love that to make it accurate, you still get the rat fink green wizard staff and dagger, which I think is like just so perfect. But, you know, what's the doofy toys you want to talk about today?
So I was looking around for like just other stuff. One of the other lines that I really like is Arco, which was another Hong Kong toy manufacturer, sort of like they were a little higher end than Imperial or Dimensions for Children. They eventually would make the Otherworld line, which is some cool bendy toys that lots of people have fond memories about. I actually had one laying around. Our friend Brian Kirst was over in the clubhouse the other day. He goes, "Whoa!" I'm just like, "Whoa!" Like, you're not like a toy guy. Like, I don't ever think of you as like being a child who played with toys. And he was just like, "This is awesome." I'm like, all right, cool. So before they had success with the Otherworld, they had a couple of lines of like cheap plastic knockoff toys. The first line, the line that I have toys from, is sort of like leaning on the success of the D&D toys, particularly the PVC ones. And it's based on the terrible movie, The Sword of the Sorcerer, which is not a movie that I would expect to have like a licensed toy line. I'm pretty sure there's lots of nudity in it. The movie itself is sort of a knockoff of like the Barbarian movie thing that kind of came out of the original Conan, right?
Right.
Have you seen this one? It's the one with the guy with the 3-bladed sword. And I think Bull Shannon from Night Court is in it.
Yeah, and I never thought that would be something they could make a toy line of. I mean, granted, yes, a triple sword is pretty awesome and sweet, but like, yeah, it's not a movie for kids.
It is really just a toy line in name only. I don't believe that there's anything in the toy line that's in the movie. I haven't really watched the movie again because it was hard to watch the first time, but you know, maybe I'll report back on that. We'll have an episode on The Sword of the Sorcerer. God, do you want that, people? I don't know.
They might.
They like to see us suffer.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything in the toy line that is really in the movie. I think maybe one of the little barbarian dudes has a sword that sort of looks like it has 3 blades, but there's like a winged lion man that really looks like the monster from, I think, the movie Sorceress.
Okay.
Which is definitely not for kids. It is also a completely different movie. So I don't know what was going on over there. Basically, it was just a way to brand a bunch of like dumb looking toys. And they're great. There's like a centaur, there's the winged lion man, there's like a weird mer unicorn, a 2-headed dragon, and like a cobra dude who's like he's like this big roided out cobra guy. He's just like a guy with a cobra head for a head.
I know, it's awesome.
And he's holding like a little hatchet and like a snake. It's just like, why are you holding a snake? Is that like, are you that on brand? But then I found, like, I was actually looking for that cobra guy. Usually the hatchet's broken off. Kind of a weirdly expensive toy because of that. I was just making the rounds, like seeing if anybody had one, and I discovered something new. Hambone,
did you?
Oh, yeah, new in the sense that like I don't remember these clearly, but once I got it in my hand, I was sort of like, oh, I do kind of remember this. Arco in 1982 produced a line of toys called Dragons and Monsters, obviously playing off of the Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And like the Dimensions for Children's Dragon Riders of the Styx line, these are small plastic figures, not unlike your army men. That scale, that general feel. brightly colored. The plastic is super shiny. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to photograph these accurately. They're so shiny and kind of like a little see-through.
Right.
They look good when you're holding them, but like I could see them being like almost like a weird illusion when you try and take a picture. But when I found them online the first time, I saw that there's a lizard man carrying a club. And as soon as I saw it, I go, I know that guy. And I don't know that guy because I had these toys as a kid. I know that guy because I have the Grenadier miniature they ripped off for it.
Oh, that's right. Everybody stole from each other back then.
Yeah. This entire line of little plastic dudes used to be little metal dudes made by a whole bunch of different companies. It's blatant piracy. They literally took RPG miniatures. They made new molds off of them, altered them slightly. So like the Lizard Man, the original Grenadier Lizard Man came out in Denizens of the Swamp, and he's got a very distinct tail with little circular studs on it. And they made his club to match. The original club has like sort of like teeth or bone in it. So it's sort of like a little bit more like an axe.
Right.
The stance, everything else about it is exactly the same, like down to the rippling muscles at his legs. There are two dragons, one of which is apparently original and looks basically modeled on the Welsh dragon. The other dragon is from Ralpartha line, Children of the Night. There's a Birdman that is from Martian Metals. There's a couple heritage sculpts, one of a genie, one of what they call the Brawn Hulk, which is basically their knockoff version. So like Heritage makes a knockoff of the Umber Hulk, and this company, Arco, takes that and just steals it like wholeheartedly.
So it's like a knockoff of a knockoff.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much.
It's so good. There's a Cyclops that's also from Martian Metals. And the one that really perplexes me, and I guess maybe they weren't lawsuit happy yet, is a troll from an early Citadel, which is Games Workshop.
Really?
Warhammer. Yeah, which Arco calls an ogre, but it like he's got a very distinct whip and mask. And the Fantasy Tribes troll from Citadel is called Troll Discipline Master with Whip, which is also super not kid friendly. I feel like. And they all come in a little plastic carrying case, which is also a little tower with the lid that pops off. The tower is super familiar to me, although I don't remember it being quite so small. I remember something larger in a similar design, but like the color of the plastic and the way that the lid fits on feels super familiar to me in like a way that dim memories from childhood feel.
That's awesome.
There's two varieties, one that is gray and has a skull and crossbone on it, and another one that's tan and has like a little bat on it. So yeah, just another weird piece of history. Like there were two sets. The toys themselves eventually, they got repackaged in a blister thing called Mutants and Monsters, also by Arco. And that was in as late as 87, 88. And it's just like, it's a whole different world. How do they get away with it? The nerve of these people how did that happen? I wish I could talk to somebody, find somebody who could like explain the thinking behind that. Like why? Like I wouldn't in a million years think to just like, I mean, I would now thinking like, well, maybe we should make old miniatures in plastic. That's cool. It's sort of astonishing to me that this was just a thing that happened apparently on the reg, because I keep finding more examples of it.
So I had a thought on it because I was actually thinking about this since the last time we talked about something like this. I think how they got away with it is they did not directly knock off Mattel or Hasbro or Kenner. You know, it's one of those things where these are smaller companies. So if they just keep knocking, you know, if they're knocking off a knockoff and back and forth and so, like a lot of these companies aren't really getting carried on the shelves of like Toys R Us or KB Toys or Child World even. They're like in the 5 and dime. They're in like the really smaller places where, you know, they really do rely on brand confusion, because if they do that, or like maybe in their like the Sears catalog or Surface merchandise or something, I don't know. But like people are like, oh, my kid likes fantasy. This is Dungeons and Dragons, right? There's a dungeon, there is a dragon, so I'm going to buy this. And so, you know, knowing how like little it costs to manufacture toys, especially overseas during like the 80s and 90s, I'm sure they were like, you know, we're going to ride it until the wheels fall off. And then like if one of the companies started feeling litigious, I'm sure it was just like a cease and desist letter, because if you are a small company making knockoffs, I doubt you have the money to really go to the mat and defend it in court You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what happened with Dragon Riders of the Styx. There's no record of an actual lawsuit. There's just some indication of cease and desist style letters. And then Dragon Riders changes some of their molds and wipes the faces off of them.
And that's it. And honestly, that's kind of all it takes, because I'm sure they wanted to keep the profit in their pockets versus having to shell all that out to get a lawyer and go and slug it out in court, when it's just like, hey guys, knock it off. And they go, all right, you got us. And then when that company goes and knocks off the other company, the letter goes back in the other direction. It's like, all right, you got us. And then that's all it has to be. However, they went toe to toe with like Kenner, Mattel, Hasbro, even LJN at a certain point, which was still a major toy manufacturer. They would have gotten nuked from space.
Yeah, I think it was just dumb luck that Dragon Riders kind of did the D&D thing. Like on paper, that should have worked out the way that this Arco set did, but it didn't, because.
But remember, like a lot of people's recollection of things like Dragon Riders of the Styx comes from the Sears Wish book or the Montgomery Ward catalog, because, you know, at that point, whoever runs these things are just taking on whatever they can. So you're getting accounts, and it doesn't even really matter per se. Whereas, like, I would say even in the 90s, you know, people probably started being like, well, hold on a second. And then especially with, like, you know, the dawn of the internet, where you could actually see stuff that really could legitimately cause brand confusion in a real way. Then I could see the lawyers being pulled off the benches. But, you know, it was the 80s, man. Anything goes.
Yeah, and Dragons and Monsters is really and truly a 5 and dime toy. This thing was never in catalogs. This was always hung up. Like, you could just tell from the packaging and the look. As soon as you hold it in your head, it's a really small, I mean, maybe 3 inches tall, 4 inches tall, the tower that they fit in. This is the thing that you hung on the rack next to the cash register, hoping that the kid is just like, Dragon, Monster, oh, I want that, you know. And then mom's like, oh god, we were almost out of here, but all right, okay, we'll get this one thing, just shut up.
Yeah, because it's like $1.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
and it shuts the kid up.
Yeah, that is exactly what this is, and that's probably why there's not a lot of them around, because like they probably got abused and they don't feel super substantial. This tower feels like it could, you know, you step on it, it's done.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they are like definitely in a backyard, you know, cemetery plot filled with like old muscle men, lost Star Wars and G.I. Joe weapons, and like, you know, someone's pet hamster that had gone onto the Rainbow Bridge. Yeah. You know, like that's why you're right. Like probably there's not a lot floating around, you know, unless it was like the one kid who like really didn't play with their toys, but just collected toys. And who's laughing now? Because that kid's making money. Stu, do you have any final thoughts on these janky toys?
Not really. I mean, like, what else is there to say? I will say, though, if you know of any other weird ass toys or stupid toys or knockoffs, particularly from the early 80s, which is like the sweet spot for me, let me know. Yeah, like the 90s, it all starts falling apart at the 90s because I feel like everybody sort of gets into it. It becomes too blatant. But yeah, like this period is just like everything seems to fly under the radar, and it has like charm to it that I don't find in other eras. So if you got any hot 80s knockoff tips, fire me an email.
Yeah, or just pop into our Discord, because we have a rockin' Discord. We love to talk about stuff like this. And if you want to know more about our Discord, why not check out our Patreon, patreon.com/vintagerpg. We've got behind the scenes look at Stu's book. What's your book called, Stu?
Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground, a guide to tabletop role-playing games from Dungeons and Dragons to Mothership.
Love it. We got a behind the scenes look at My Game 321 action. We got early release episodes. We've got games that we're starting to run monthly with our patrons. And we've got a special Discord just for the patrons. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. I glazed over where you could find us, Stu, because I'm at John McGuire RPG. You are at vintage_RPG on Instagram. And from there, you will have a springboard to find us wherever we are on social media. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, because your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.